What's up everyone, and welcome to my updated Tighnari guide. Since my last guide, there has been a ton of new additions hailing from Natlan and even Nod Krai that cater to Tighnari and elevate his existing playstyles and teams, or give him all new ones with Lauma and the new Lunar Bloom reaction. I'll cover all these new things as well as how to best build and play Tighnari, so sit back, relax, hit the like button, and let's get your Tighnari up to date and as strong as possible. First up, let's talk about Tighnari's kit. Tighnari is a charge attack DPS. When charge attacking, he can fire a normal charge attack arrow as all bow users can, but holding his charge attack even further gives way for his special level 2 charge shot. It initially fires one arrow and follows up with 4 cluster bloom arrows. A key thing to know about it is that while his shot fundamentally scales off of his attack stat, they're also highly benefited from his elemental mastery, whereby Tighnari's EM directly increases the damage of a special charge shot and his elemental burst. This is incredibly fitting as when Tighnari does charge attack, he'll be performing all these various danger reactions, so Tighnari can deal high personal damage and high reaction damage. But to unlock Tighnari's true strength, you need to use his elemental skill, bringing us to an odd but also very unique and fun aspect to Tighnari. When triggered, Tighnari will back away and a Dendro Mist will form, which can aggro enemies, all the while making Tighnari's charge shot instantly ready. With this skill, Tighnari can fire 3 charge shots, which you can keep track of based on the little fireflies to his left. Now, because Tighnari can only shoot 3 charge shots at incredibly fast speeds, Tighnari's attack window is extremely short, much shorter than really every DPS in the game. It's because of this that playing him can feel a bit awkward. You'll play him for like 5 seconds, then after the 3 shots you're kinda just standing there waiting for his skill to be recast. You could fire more charge shots, but they take so long you'll probably end up dying before you can even fire them. Really, you only have 2 options to fix this. 1, playing a sub DPS with Tighnari when his abilities are down, getting you a little dual DPS action, which I personally find really fun. And Yai Miko is perfect for this. With her long skill and burst, she completely fills in the gap of Tighnari's downtime. On the other hand, there's a way to extend Tighnari's attack window that really make him feel like a normal DPS. When you begin a fight, you want to outright use his skill, want to use your other team's abilities, and when that's done, you fire all of his charge shots, and just a few seconds later his skill refreshes, enabling you to charge attack again. This effectively doubles Tighnari's damage within his rotation, but after testing this and its normal, much shorter rotation, they came to the same clear time. Last but not least comes Tighnari's burst. It's a very simple but effective talent that sends a swarm of Dendro shots towards enemies. With this in mind, as you begin to level Tighnari's talents, first prioritize his normal attack to buff his charge attacks, then level his burst. With Tighnari's kit covered, let's now delve into the weapon section. As always, I've ran the numbers, tested all of his bows, and will be ranking them from strongest to weakest, and let me know which of the bows you'll be using. At the very top for first place is Tighnari's signature, the Hunter's Path. Despite it being fairly old, his signature has stood the test of time and remains as his best. With all the EM and charge attack bonus, you'll see very impressive numbers from Tighnari, but you'll similarly see very impressive numbers from the second best, the First Great Magic, and Yelan's Aqua Simulacra. These two dealt very close damage despite having very different passives, so they're essentially equal. Finally, things are switched up and we now branch out to the recent additions of Genshin at number 3, being Chaska's signature weapon. It is a very nice bow, having huge crit damage like the last two and furthering Tighnari's charge attack and burst at the same time. There's also the Thundering Pulse, another crit damage bow, but this time around it's really only used for its substat, given its passive upgrades normal attacks. On the topic of normal attacks, this aptly brings us to the Polar Star. Now comrades, we move to more accessible weapons from the limited banner to the standard banner, whereby the Skyward Harp came out as superior to the Amos bow. This marks the end of all of Tighnari's 5-star options, but remarkably this is not at all a bad thing, as Tighnari is one of the few characters that have extremely strong 4-star weapons. There are so many bows he can use, and in fact it's probably a little too much, but I'm gonna try to make this as simple as possible. Alright, much to my disbelief, and a good number of you Tighnari enjoyers will feel vindicated, the first place was taken by the Slingshot. Now this bow really took me back. You'd think with it being a 3-star, it's as good as Amber, but when you consider its very high crit rate and crazy 60% charge attack bonus, this couldn't be further from the truth, as long as you adhere to its strict requirement in its passive, which is really the main drawback of the Slingshot. It's for this reason that number 2 is my personal favorite, the Battle Pass Scion of the Blazing Sun. The Blazing Sun is really a 4-star version of the Slingshot, but with no strings attached on how you play. But with so many strong free bows, there's not a huge incentive in getting the Battle Pass. Case in point, the Windbloom Ode. I'm sure a good number of you have it, and don't overlook it as I did. Overlook it visually, sure, but with its high EM and attack stat, it's too good to ignore. After these bows, we head into a level of DPS, and good DPS mind you, where really every bow outputs DPS within the same range. Sure, some bows output a bit more than others, but they're all effectively equal and you could really use whichever one you want. This range encompasses the various EM event bows like the Piercer, the craftables, namely the Song of Stillness, Prototype Crescent, and Hamayumi, the recent limited bow, the Flower Wreathed Feathers, and even the Viridescent Hunt. And yes, I know some of you are thinking about this, the Stringless. And for any of you in early game, again, the Slingshot is your best pick, but there is also the Messenger, Sharpshooter's Oath, and Raven Bow if you don't yet have them. Moving on, let's now go over an incredibly vital part to Tighnari, his artifacts. But before we get into it, I just ask that you take a quick second to like the video and possibly subscribe. This helps the channel out immensely and would mean a lot to me. But back to the video, the absolute strongest set on Tighnari is for Wanderer's Troop. Wanderers is perfect on him, giving him his highly desired EM stat and a massive charge attack bonus. Wanderers fits Tighnari so well it's practically designed for him. But speaking of design, Hoyoverse designed an insanely cruel choke in Wanderers where, as great as it is, it straight up cannot be farmed. It's so bad that you've got better chances of getting a C6 Tighnari instead of getting a good Wanderer set. Thankfully, however, the devs showed us some mercy and released 4 Gilded Dreams, and its buffs are so good that it outputs the exact same or extremely close DPS to Wanderer's Troop. You really won't even tell the difference, but it's because of the latter that in certain cases Wanderers ever so slightly beats it, but in truth they're on par with each other and you should run either of these sets. Behind these two giants of sets, we're reminded of Fontaine's supremacy, as behind them was Mara Shosei Hunter. Like, for many characters, it's amazing, its insanely high crit rate gives way for insanely high crit damage, to where it could even top Wanderer's Troop or Gilded Dreams, but as always, it comes with the caveat of requiring Farina. Outside of this are two-piece combinations like double EM, Mara Shosei and EM, attack and EM, and double attack as the weakest. So for better or for worse, Tighnari's top sets have not changed in all this time, but what certainly has is the sets of his teammates, which are arguably just as important as Tighnari's own artifacts that will either make or break his damage, so it's crucial you get them right. One you may have already guessed is for Deepwood. With a massive shred of 40%, it's a must-have on all of Tighnari's teams. Next to it, we've got for Instructor and the new Silken Moon Serenade. Other than the latter having a much nicer name, these two sets are pretty much identical, giving Tighnari even more of his much wanted elemental mastery. It'd be amazing if you could run both of them at the same time, but they do have their weaknesses. Instructor is easy to trigger and unrestricted at the cost of having a 4-star stat, whereas Silken Moon is locked to Ascendant Gleam to give its max buffs and is more so meant for Lunar Bloom teams. Then there's Force Intercity, which though not having EM like the last two is still very valuable in its 40% danger damage bonus. And last but for sure still worthwhile is Noblesse or Tenacity for a higher attack. If you're early in the game, you should use or mix and match sets like Sojourner, Berserker, Braveheart, Instructor, and Martial Artist. As for main stats, the best combination is EM, danger damage, and crit. Now, the golden question that is always asked is, can I use an attack sense instead of EM? The answer is yes, but attack is definitely not perfect. In terms of personal damage, you will most likely notice a drop in damage due to how major EM is to Tighnari's damage. Now, granted, he is still usable with attack, so it's not as though he is unusable, but then you factor in his weaker reaction damage as well, and overall, you should use an EM stance on him unless you have a crazy attack sense or just terrible luck. Similarly with these stats, aim for the substats of both crits, EM, attack, and lastly, energy recharge. Next up, let's talk about Tighnari's Constellations. Being a standard character, Tighnari has a big advantage in that you can pull him multiple times and you now even have the 5-star Constellation selector, so getting these Constellations and even his C6 is not at all impossible. Right off the bat with C1, he has a very nice Constellation, providing him a flat 15% crit rate to his charge attacks. It would have been even nicer if this also applied to his burst, but all the same, he'll crit far more often and maybe even allow you to build more crit damage on him. C2 adds more function to his skill, transforming it into a bit of a buffing skill. Now, with the mist created by his skill, if enemies are in it, Tighnari gains a nice 20% danger damage bonus. Given the way his skill works and that enemies are pretty much always in the mist, this Constellation activates quite reliably and will net you a surprisingly nice gain in DPS. C4 shifts gears from the last two and makes Tighnari himself a bit of a buffer. Whenever Tighnari unleashes his burst and should it trigger a reaction, his entire team, including him, gains 120 EM in total. Considering considering that EM is so good on him and that his team will be triggering reactions, this is a really nice constellation to have, buffing him even more than C2 as well as increasing the damage of your entire team. On to the last and of course the most important constellation, C6. His C6 is a bit of a head scratcher. So already the charging for his level 2 shot was fast, but now it's even faster. And his cluster bloom arrows gain an additional arrow as well, breaking from 4 arrows into 5. This change might sound small, but it is a very powerful one. Tighnari's DPS is extremely buffed by his C6, but oddly enough, it makes the problem of his short attack windows even more apparent. Finally, let's go over Tighnari's new best teams, and this is where Tighnari sees many of his changes. One I know you're all interested in is with Tighnari and Lunar Bloom, and yes, Tighnari can totally play in Lunar Bloom. Naturally, this has all to do with Lauma. Lauma is such a powerhouse of a character, she makes Hyper Bloom one of Tighnari's less ideal compositions into his best one. For this setup, you'll have Tighnari paired with Lauma and Kuki. This is the core of the team, providing healing and a gentle rest shred for both Tighnari and Lauma to make great use of, but a big portion of this damage is Hyper Bloom, and this brings us to two paths. For the Hydra support, you can run Aino, and Aino will bring with her increased DM through Silken Moon, but most importantly, Ascendant Gleam, and this shifts the team into having a much greater emphasis on Lunar Bloom, as Lauma's buffs will center more on it. But remember, Lunar Bloom only comes about when Lauma holds her skill. However, this buff by Lauma will not at all be used to its max potential, certainly not in the way that it would be with, say, Nefer, who can perform Lunar Blooms outside of Lauma's hold skill. As a result, you could use Furina instead of Aino to keep the team at Ascent Gleam. With it, Lauma would strengthen Hyper Blooms by making them crit, as the crit ratio is kinda diabolical, but it absolutely does make a difference. And of course, with Furina, she will bring with herself a very high Dendro damage, which Kuki can remarkably build up, and this is all thanks to Tighnari's short field time, which enables her to heal more than just him. Another very powerful team is with the tried and tested Spread Tighnari, with Nahida instead of Lauma. Now yes, Lauma on all accounts is amazing at pretty much has power grip Nahida, but this is really only true when there are Dendro cores involved in the team, like say Hyper Bloom teams and so on, because Lauma is directly meant for such teams. So great news, the Dendro Munchkin is still getting play, and here's the new setup that includes Yansan as the second Electro character. Here the team works as it always has, but it is highly benefited by Yansan's 40% damage bonus and increased attack. This amounts to very strong hits from both Tighnari and Yai, but to get the most out of Yansan's buff, you need to move around a lot, and the best way to do this is by running just as you fire Tighnari's charge attacks. However, a good rule of thumb is to do this even without a Yansan to stay clear of enemies. With these two teams alone, you'd be more than prepared to taking on Nod Krai, but I don't want to leave you enough of players hanging without anything, so here is something for you all. A Lunar Charge Spread composition. The best way I can describe this team is, you know the saying, throw something and see if it sticks? Well, this team throws about 100 things and they all stick. There is so much to this team, both mechanic wise and visually. Seriously, just even looking at this hurts my eyes, but the possible blindness is worth it. Naturally, with Aino and Nefa, Lunar Charges come into play. You'll see huge Lunar Charge hits, but where the real magic happens is with all the numbers you don't see. Throwing Tighnari into the mix then brings about spreads and aggravates, especially when Aino's burst is done, but when it is up, Bloom will be performed behind all these reactions and subsequently Hyper Bloom. The result is all these particles being thrown at your face, but also all these damage numbers you cannot keep track of, but totally make a difference. Well everyone, this is my guide. If you've enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing, and be sure to ask me any questions you have on Tighnari.